When people are struggling or trying to heal, they naturally look for people whose story feels familiar. Somebody who survived the same thing, somebody who understands the pain, somebody who feels like proof that healing is actually possible. And honestly, I understand that deeply because I used to do it too. I kept searching for people who thought like me, who processed things like me, who lived through what I lived through. I wanted certainty. I wanted a blueprint. I wanted someone to hand me a map. I wanted somebody to say, here, do these things, and eventually you'll feel okay again. But eventually, I realized something, that healing does not work like copy and paste. You can learn from people, you can take what helps, and you can feel less alone because of somebody's story. But nobody can hand you the exact roadmap for your own life. That part, you build in real time. Let's get into it. Welcome back to Rebuild Different. I'm Epiphany Page, and today we're talking about social media therapy culture. And today we're talking about how healing culture became performance and why self-awareness means absolutely nothing unless your behavior changes. Now, before people get defensive, let me be clear. I am not anti-self-help. I am definitely not anti-therapy. And I am not anti-talking about mental health online. I think a lot of people have finally found language for things that they never understood before, and that matters. Some people grew up in environments where emotions were ignored completely. Some people never learned boundaries or emotional regulation. And a lot of us genuinely need help understanding why we move the way that we do. That's real. But I also think with the internet ruling everything, that something shifted online where healing slowly became content. Now, everybody's diagnosing attachment styles. Everybody's talking about nervous systems. Everybody's talking about protecting their peace. Everybody's doing the work. And again, don't get me wrong. Some of those conversations genuinely help people. It's helped me too. But social media rewards performance. So eventually, performance entered healing too. Now, a lot of people only know how to sound self-aware. That's very different. Because being able to explain your patterns is not the same as changing them. You can know why you're anxious and still self-sabotage every healthy relationship that you enter. You can definitely repost boundary quotes all day and still accept disrespect in your life. You can identify every trauma response and still refuse accountability when you hurt people. You can explain attachment theory perfectly and still only choose emotionally unavailable people over and over again. Awareness is the beginning, not the finish line. And honestly, I think this is where people need discernment. Because once healing became content, there were always going to be people who learned how to market themselves as emotionally evolved. And that's the part that bothers me. Not because I think everybody is malicious. I don't. But there will always be people who will turn into whatever they need to become to keep people emotionally attached to them, following them, buying from them, needing them. And when someone is desperate for relief, that makes them vulnerable to certainty, especially online, because algorithms reward emotional repetition. So if somebody builds a platform around their trauma, their triggers, their wounds, their healing journey, eventually the audience is going to start reinforcing that identity too. And sometimes the creator gets trapped inside it themselves, because now healing is no longer just personal. It's branding, it's validation, it's community, it's income. So now there's pressure to keep performing the wound. And that's dangerous. Because real healing eventually requires evolution. It requires behavioral change. It requires becoming different. And you see it everywhere now. I was guilty of this too, but people reposting therapy content constantly, but still repeating those same destructive cycles for years. Protecting my peace can become code for avoidance, avoiding accountability, avoiding hard conversations, avoiding discomfort. And some people can become so identified with a diagnosis or trauma that growth almost feels threatening, because the wound became their identity. And I could say firsthand, I experienced this because for years, I led with the fact that I was a cancer survivor. I was trying to cling to any identity, and that's what I had been for a long time. That wound was my identity, and I had to learn how to grow out of it. Which brings me to my next point. I think something else that we really need to talk about more is the difference between self-expression and self-regulation. Expressing your emotions is healthy. Talking about your pain is healthy. But if every emotion immediately controls your behavior, if every trigger becomes an explosion, or if every uncomfortable feeling becomes somebody else's responsibility, that's not healing. And social media sometimes blurs that line badly, because someone sounding emotionally intelligent does not automatically translate to emotionally stable. That's different. And honestly, I think one of the best things that happened to me in my personal healing process was realizing that I couldn't fully copy someone else's healing process. I couldn't find one person whose journey perfectly matched mine. And at first, that felt very isolating. But looking back, I think it forced me to develop discernment. I had to observe myself honestly, study my own patterns, what helps me grow, what keeps me stuck, who keeps me stuck, what behaviors make my life worse, and what behaviors actually move me forward. Because healing is about repetition, choosing differently repeatedly. And that part is usually boring. It's not aesthetic, it's not viral, because it's not cute. Sometimes healing just looks like going to bed earlier, not texting that dusty MF back, following through with your own boundaries, apologizing. Some of y'all don't like to apologize. Regulating your emotions before reacting. That was a big one for me. Keeping promises to yourself. Having hard conversations instead of avoiding them. And learning to sit in discomfort without trying to escape. That's the real work. And honestly, I've had to catch myself with this too. Because there is a big difference between understanding yourself and actually changing your life. And those two things don't always happen at the same speed. Again, sometimes you can explain every pattern, every trigger, every defense mechanism, and still you find yourself repeating the same patterns anyway. That's real, and that's human. And I also think that's why this conversation matters. Because healing cannot just become consuming content, collecting language, or perfectly explaining why you are the way you are. At some point, something actually has to change. And maybe that's really the point that I'm trying to make in this whole episode. Take what helps, learn from people, let people inspire you. Keep what genuinely helps you grow. But don't get so busy searching for someone else's roadmap that you stop learning yourself in the process. Because nobody can fully build that part for you. That you got to build as you go. See you guys next week.